Hey there guys, how's it going today? Today we just want to do like a chill stream, so I want to just have um stuff kind of um just make it kind of chill. So we're just gonna watch some videos today and kind of do a little bit of reactions. So gonna be doing Casual Geographic. I actually like this guy a lot. It's really cool. He's pretty sassy while he's giving you some educational videos. So, let's see. Do I'm gonna go ahead and start the first video, which is going to be Top 10 Animals with Black Air Force Energy.
Black Air Force Energy. Good old
Let me
Urban
know if you
Dictionary
guys can't
defines it
hear
as
it.
a person or an object that has insane potential and is crazy enough to deal with anything without fear or hesitation, regardless of moral alignment, including its own rivals or competitors. And despite clearly taking grammar lessons from NBA YoungBoy, I'd say whoever wrote that was pretty on point. It's a term I use a lot in my videos without really explaining exactly what it is.
Nice.
So here's a full list of the top 10 animals.
Why am I need to move myself. I need to not be in the center. Oh, huh. I know why I'm in the center. Yeah, just hold on. Let's just move my ass over here. Yeah, cringe. Yeah, I deserve that. Yeah, okay.
Animals with the most Black Air Force energy. Some animals are an obvious pick, others might just surprise you. But they've all earned their spot, including the animal at number 10, which might have the least clout of any animal on this list, but that's only because it's found one place in the world. Because if this bird were airdropped
Is
across the
that the
globe, it'd
kiwi?
definitely be more known for all the wrong reasons. Starting off is what happens when an animal is too smart for everyone
Ah,
else's quality of life. The Kia is a large parrot
Kia.
that can be found terrorizing the people of New Zealand. And don't let it fool you, this Black Air Force
They're
with a Grinch
destructive
colorway
as
is an
hell.
op in every way. They're highly intelligent and armed with a hook-shaped beak, which is the perfect tool for Kias to inflate insurance by picking apart cars. You see, the Kia is smart enough to associate people and the cars we drive with food, which is why this anti-mechanic is famous for committing the cutest carjackings you'll ever see. Of course, they don't just stop at cars. This feather felon will go through purses, backpacks, duffel bags, and swipe anything they can fly away with. There was even a case where this airborne pirate stole the passport of a Scottish man that didn't want to be identified. Because no one wants to be remembered for getting denied from your home country because you got your passport pickpocketed by a panhandling parrot. It happened to him and it can happen to you, but guess what? If you happen to get your wallet snatched and try to see the Kia about it, be prepared to also eat a several $1,000 fine and even jail time.
Yikes.
Kias are protected by the government because it only makes sense that something with wings would be above the law. And it's almost like every Kia knows it and acts accordingly. But it's not just humans getting griefed. Kias will regularly raid other birds' nests and make omelets with their unborn children. And they'll use that Swiss Army knife of a nose to remove parts of a living sheep to eat. And there have been reports of them victimizing dogs and even horses.
Yikes.
But at least the Kia isn't a legitimate physical threat to people. The next animal's responsible for putting more zookeepers on workers' comp than any other animal.
Ah! I forgot. I'm sorry, guys. I have ads on YouTube because I'm not paying for YouTube Red. Sorry about that.
The African wilderness has some of the most ways to F around and find out per square mile in the world. So it makes sense that living in the most
I'm full screened here. So like that? Okay. Are we switching accounts? Top 10 animals with black Air Force energy. Oh, so we're switching it to yours, sweetie? You have YouTube Red? Oh, sweet. Thank you, sweetie. Sagril is getting his up, so we don't have to have ads. I am absolutely destroying your feed with Casual Geographic because, yes. All right, let me get out of your way. Technical difficulties, please bear with us. Oh, excuse me. Okay. No, thanks. Boop. Oh, I know which one it is. Boink. Top 10 animals with Air Force. Black Air Force energy. Boom. Full screen it.
It happened to him and it can happen to you, but guess what? If you happen to get your wallet snatched with wings would be above the law. And it's
There we
almost
go.
like every Kia knows it and acts accordingly. But it's not just humans getting griefed. Kias will regularly raid other birds' nests and make omelets with their unborn children. And they'll use that Swiss Army knife of a nose to remove
We are
parts of a
watching
living
Casual
sheep to eat. And there
Geographic
have been reports of them
videos.
victimizing
This
dogs
guy
and
is
even horses.
sassy.
But at least the Kia isn't a legitimate
He
physical threat
does
to people. The
blur
next
things
animal is
out,
responsible
but we
for putting more
switched.
zookeepers on workers' comp than any other animal.
Yes.
The African wilderness has some of the most ways to F around and find out per square mile in the world. So it makes sense that living in the most dangerous
Oh,
area codes
zebra.
in the world has turned the zebra into an actual psychopath. This oppressed Oreo horse has the strongest kick in the animal kingdom, strong enough for Marty to have written it
Depressed
outside of a
Oreo
sequel.
horse.
Which is why, even though lions body them often, every once in a while a lion has to explain to his ancestors how he got flatlined by a high-strung equality donkey. But the generational
High-strung
anxiety of being constantly hunted
equality
means the zebra will
donkey.
often one-shot
What?
something for existing too close to it. There's two reasons why you won't see a person riding a zebra. One, they're too small. And two, every zebra is fundamentally a bastard to its core. No, like literally. Because many mother zebras will actually mate with as many babies
Minecraft
as
die.
possible. Because if she's showing and he suspects it's not hers, they'll violently press her until it's terminated. And if the baby's already out, that's just an invitation for him to demote her from mother to mourning. And going back to humans, zebras are infamous for allegedly putting as many zoo staff in the ER as any other animal. They may look like horses whose favorite part of a birthday is the finger painting station, but this panda pony's liable to paint the block with their insides if you breathe at them the wrong way. Treat one like a barnyard animal and negotiate your left hand. And because zebras are genetically closer to donkeys than horses, calling it the ass of Africa is a scientifically accurate title. And as the default protein of many of the landlords of the savannah, it's a title they hold with pride, cause it's the best one they can get. 10% off is also what you can expect if you treat this barcode horse as a petting zoo. But at least they have the excuse of constantly being plotted on. The next animal has less excuses but more disrespect. Deer manage to cause billions of dollars in damage a year by playing freeze tag with cars, and that ironically makes them the most dangerous animal in America. But where blissful ignorance makes deer a threat, the deer of down under initiate conflict. 9 out of 10 car accidents in Australia involve kangaroos, and a good number of them are premeditated and not by the driver. Kangaroos assault vehicles with enough regularity to commit insurance fraud.
Ooh! Oh wow.
Kangaroos will regularly beef with inanimate objects. But it's not just a bluff. These are some brolic marsupials, armed with claws, but more importantly a sharp dagger of a toenail. Which is why it's not a kangaroo's punch you have to worry about, but that Jurassic pedicure disembowelment. It's what makes their sparring
He
sessions
needs
so
some
lethal.
milk.
That and the fact that kangaroos start every day with the specific goal of inconveniencing as many life forms as possible. If you happen to fly a drone in kangaroo country, prepare to have your insurance tested. In fact, it's not a stretch to say they hate anything that flies. Can you imagine how ridiculous this could have gotten? Imagine people thinking you died paragliding when really you survived but got mobbed by a pack of roid rabbits on impact.
Holy
Kangaroos
shit.
are number 8 because there's really no good reason for this. You see, as dangerous as Australia is, there aren't really any dominant apex land predators. While kangaroos often contend with dingoes and the occasional wedge-tailed eagle, a full-grown kangaroo doesn't have much that can threaten it, other than a bigger kangaroo. So my working theory is, they got cocky. And until nature airdrops some bears or maybe some type of big cat, kangaroos are still gonna be out here thinking they can do whatever. Try to change their mind at your own risk. As on-site as these malicious macropods are, they're not even the most disrespectful animal in Australia, and believe me, we'll get to that. The Big Five refers to the top 5 most dangerous animals to hunt in Africa. These include the elephant, the rhinoceros, the lion, the leopard, and an animal so feared it's been nicknamed Black Death. The African Cape buffalo is a walking attempted homicide case armed with a pair of horns to make most attempts successful. They have one of the highest KD ratios against humans with guns. In some places, these tanks with road rage and 50% of the people they go after, and a lot of that is because they will actively seek revenge. There have been stories of one buffalo murking the same hunter that took out a member of its own herd. And whether you're a lion or a hunter, these trench cows get it back in blood. And the scariest version of a Cape buffalo is one that's already been injured. Hunters have followed a mortally wounded buffalo into thick brush, only for the freight train with legs to circle back and ambush them from behind. Which is why the #1 rule when hunting Cape buffalo, assume you only have one shot because that's usually all you get. But it's not just humans getting bodied. Bloodlusting buffalo will seek out unsupervised lion cubs and log them out of life before they can grow up to be a threat. Not like the adults aren't at risk either. Capes will stalk and circle lone lions, using the threat of gang violence to give Mufasa a roommate. Which is how the same apex predator that can solo multiple hyenas can get sent up a tree like a house cat. They're like the Liam Neeson of animals. Wrong them and they make it their life's mission to co-sign your obituary. That first hit was self-defense. Everything after that was a personal choice. And even though experienced lions can take them down, it's still very much a gamble. Especially since they can travel in herds of hundreds. That's also how they earned the nickname Widowmaker. Because right now there's at least one woman on Tinder because her husband decided to hunt a 1-ton vibe check while the buffalo decided that would be the day he'd finally live up to his nickname. It's a murderous mammal, but like the zebra, it's often just self-defense gone way too far. Not like the antics of the next animal. If you're talking about the Black Air Force of the sky, you're probably talking about crows, or really just corvids in general. Crows are smart enough to manipulate their environment to their advantage, but they're also devious enough to manipulate other animals for their own sadistic pleasure. I don't know what that crow said to that cat, but it certainly involves someone's mother. Ravens will weaponize their relationship with wolves to call out hits on competing coyotes. Crows in Tokyo have especially become a problem where they've basically gone to war against the entire human population. But it's not just humans getting bullied. There might not be a worse time to be an owl than in broad daylight surrounded by a murder of crows. Not to mention crows will often raid the nests of other birds for a disturbingly literal kids meal. And that's when they're not just straight up snatching minors in front of their parents. I think EDP just found a spirit animal. They'll regularly mob and harass other birds until they drop the food they've already caught. And crows won't hesitate to beat on much larger birds of prey, which might explain why they do the exact same thing with humans to get them to surrender whatever calories they have on them. But the avian onslaught peaks out with the Australian magpie. Now turns out they're not actually corvids. They actually sit closer to another bird with psychopath tendencies. Either way, Australian magpies manage to be the most feared thing in a country seasoned with crocs, cassowaries, and snakes. And while most wildlife is harmless as long as you respect their space, the earth is their space, and they have no patience for trespassers. To the point where many Australians have taken to wearing helmets to protect themselves from the magpie's malicious intent. Especially during swooping season, where magpies will relentlessly attack anything that gets near their nest. Actual human lives have been lost to this goth Tweety's tantrums. And since corvids can remember faces, once you've been swooped, you can expect the same treatment next year. I think Tirzu said it best, corvids are what would happen if you gave monkeys wings. But at least in the magpie's case, they're only a legitimate threat to a human way of life for the roughly 6 weeks of swooping season. Next animal is one of the biggest dangers to humans all year round. It was really only a matter of time before the river rhino made an appearance. Widely considered the world's deadliest mammal, you may have noticed that hippos weren't included in the Big Five, and I have to assume that's because nobody that has a desire to see the next day would actually hunt them. Arguably, no animal has a harder working PR team than a hippopotamus. First of all, it's not the goofy lard donkey it lets you think it is. A thin subcutaneous fat layer means hippos are actually walking units. And despite their awkward appearance, hippos can outpace any human over short distances, and that includes on land and in water, where they somehow become even more territorial. Hippos have been known to lower the census totals of other animals for seemingly no reason. Just when an antelope thinks it's been bailed out, the slaughter horse does origami with its spine. And even though they're supposed to be herbivores, every once in a while they'll give into the temptation of tasting the flesh of their victims. Cannibalism is not off the table. Science doesn't really know why exactly they do this, but science doesn't account for an animal just being a dick. Few predators will press this obese water pig, and those that do so at their own risk. Hippos are so carnage happy that the biggest threat to a baby hippo is a bigger, meaner bull hippo. It's how a hippo baby shower can legitimately end in a rain of flesh confetti. Now, to be fair, plenty of animals resort to infanticide. Hippos are just really mean about it. Like I said, nobody's PR team works harder, except maybe dolphins. Which makes sense since despite resembling ungulates like warthogs and rhinos, the hippo's closest living relatives are actually cetaceans like dolphins and whales. But instead of making it out in the ocean, hippos decided to make a living griefing everything in its area code. And I didn't even mention the way they claim that area code.
Poop. I already know this one.
You know, if you unsubscribed right now, I wouldn't blame you. The only thing that can make this whale Karen more of a menace than it already is if it were a straight up predator, or if it hunted in packs. Then again, that would literally make it an animal further down this list.
This gives me a good reason not to go to Australia. I think a lot of creatures on this list is in Australia.
As much as I love them, elephants can be a devastating combination of smart enough to do anything and big enough to get away with it. Asian elephants especially get themselves into trouble by raiding villages and emptying out their rice supply, which is why Asian elephants are responsible for the bulk of human hashtags, especially since they can be just as vengeful as the Cape buffalo. Earlier this year, a man in Thailand had an elephant working hauling wood in the brutal heat, which is illegal, and apparently the elephant knew his rights because he proceeded to rip his boss in half. And of course, we gotta address the I'm better than that. One elephant traveled over 100 miles to murk a 70-year-old woman collecting water, only to pull up to her funeral to attack the sole evicted body, this time in front of her family.
Damn.
The biggest mystery of mankind is what motivated a 4-ton pachyderm to pack up an elderly woman twice. If he had a reason, it's not like he's gonna tell us. Elephants rank over hippos because where hippos commit war crimes in the heat of passion, when an elephant catches a body, you can almost be certain it was premeditated. And it's in populations that have been fragmented by poaching where young male elephants really fly off the handle. And bull elephants are already pretty high strung as it is, but they managed to get worse in communities decimated by poaching, to the point where 3 elephants in South Africa were responsible for deleting 63 rhinos as well as charging at people. Now, to be fair, poaching typically targets older bulls, and research shows that without old heads around, younger male elephants go into must a lot sooner than they should, which I get. What I don't get is why that has to involve turning a rhino from a tight end to a wideout. What you have to remember is that elephants are intelligent enough to experience every human emotion like compassion, empathy, and hope. But for every headline like this, you might get a headline like this. And if elephants wore shoes, they'd rock the biggest black Air Forces the world's ever seen. But that's only because the next animal on this list doesn't have legs. One of the biggest injustices of cinema is that where dolphins got cast as a lovable flipper, sharks got typecast as Jaws. Dolphins are the most disrespectful beings in the ocean. Makes sense because they're basically intelligent hydrodynamic hippos. They regularly bully sharks, use fish heads and live eels as marital aids, commit unprovoked acts of porpoising, all while letting humanity think they're the good guys. They have mating practices so brutal that I probably can't even talk about them. Just know that what dolphins like to do to each other, guidelines might try to do to me. But we can't talk about dolphins without talking about the biggest dolphin of all. The orca is the most dominant apex predator on the planet that isn't human. And as if sheer size and intelligence wasn't enough, they typically hunt in pods with the coordination of a wolf pack, which is how this oppressive sea oriole regularly griefs the tankiest animals on the planet. They're such a force that great whites have been known to abandon hunting grounds for up to a year once this steroid quality guppy makes an appearance. Probably because they've been known to use the shark's biology against them to rob them of their heart and liver, just to leave the rest of the shark to sink to the abyss.
One of the natural enemies of a moose is an orca, believe it or not.
And then there's the fact that orcas often practice their craft on other animals. Which is why if you ever feel bad about penguins getting bullied by seals, I suggest you see what happens when a Navy SEAL joins the Air Force. And while you could chalk this up to hunting strategy, there's also the chance that living life on Roku difficulty means orcas get bored and just start trying stuff. And while it's true a wild orca has never taken out a human, that hasn't stopped them from actively messing with human vessels with disturbing regularity. It's like they know who's ruining the ocean and adjust their behavior accordingly. Either way, orcas are the humans of the sea, and anything that steps to them gets reminded expeditiously. Even moose of all things. Moral of the story, Free Willy should have been put on parole. The only thing more black Air Force than an animal that griefs everything around it would be an animal that commits atrocities against its own kind. And that's why orcas are only number 3. Ask any zookeeper what animal they fear the most. If they don't say chimps, they've never worked with one. A common misconception is that chimps are 5 times stronger than the average man. And while the number is actually closer to 1.5, chimps have more fast twitch muscles, a stronger bite force, and a stronger grip force. Their ability to use tools is fascinating to watch, until you realize that means they're able to create and use weapons. People often forget that chimpanzees are pack hunting predators able to execute attacks with the precision of early man, and that doesn't just apply to their prey. Chimps in Luongo National Park have been documenting attacking families of gorillas and murking any helpless offspring they can get their hands on. Literally no animal safe from the violent tendencies of a furious George. But it's the damage they inflict against their own kind that puts them over the top. Chimp casualties often share the same injuries: a disfigured face, missing fingers if not entire hands, and a non-consensual neutering. Chimps seem to have an understanding of what's important to an animal, and they go out of their way to remove it. It's why I can show you this picture and you'll understand. And it's why instead of organ donor I have, if ever maimed by a chimp, just let me die on my driver's license. And it's also why you probably have a better chance of surviving being locked in a room with a lion than in a room with a furry chainsaw with thumbs. The fact that a chimp can get put 6 feet under by members of its own troop guarantees them a spot on this list. The only way an animal could beat that is if something was enough of a menace to be a legitimate threat to itself. And that's exactly what number 1 is. But before we reveal number 1, here's some honorable mentions. The Canadian goose, for having the most irrational confidence of any animal. They actually almost went extinct, and now they revolve their entire existence around punishing humanity for it. Swans, because what geese think they are, swans always have been. Wolverines, because they're more than capable of hunting for themselves, but they'd rather tax animals 3 times their size for a living. Meerkats, for being quite literally the most homicidal mammals on the planet.
Oh, wow.
And now at number 1, to absolutely no one's surprise, the honey badger, the most unapologetically disrespectful creature on Earth. I have an entire video dedicated to the exploits of this steroid skunk, but here are some highlights. They'll regularly pinch food from leopards and then throw a tantrum if they get caught. They'll take on packs of animals that realistically should be able to one-shot them, but the Oreo weasel has plot armor and a form of crackhead courage. They'll raid the hives of African bees, the same bees that are 10 times meaner and sting 10 times more than their European cousins. And honey badgers aren't immune to bee stings. They're resistant, but enough stings will flatline a honey badger. But ask the honey badger if he cares. He won't answer, but you know the answer. These prison ferrets also run fades with highly venomous cobras. If they manage to get bitten, they'll just slip into a cobra-induced coma and then wake up hours later and walk it off like a Sunday morning hangover. Even the honey badger's idea of self-defense is as offensive as you can get. As in, they'll reverse their anal pouches inside out and release a smell so pungent it can allegedly paralyze attacking bees. And honestly, any animal that religiously attacks the baby makers of others is a different tier of menace. No other badger represented this better than Stoffel, who once escaped from his enclosure and picked a fight with a neighboring family of lions who nearly mauled him to death. After about 2 months in the hospital, the first thing the affiliated ferret did fresh out was go right back at the same lions to settle the score. And that was only one of the hundreds of times Stoffel managed to raise the blood pressure of the people around him. Here's the real kicker. Stoffel was actually hand-raised by humans at a young age and therefore imprinted on them. He had no intention of ever leaving. The whole thing was just a game to him. Because if blatant disrespect were a sport, they still wouldn't play it because anything involving rules goes against a honey badger's belief system. But that's gonna do it for this video. For more consistent content, be sure to follow my Instagram and TikTok. I try to post daily on both. And to further support this channel, my Patreon's also gonna be in the description. But also, don't feel like you have to give anything. If you watched the video this far, you've already done more than enough. But other than that, drink water, hug your mother, don't hug a honey badger, it'll never end well. And I'll see you in the next one.
Let's see. Videos. That honey badger one. Oh, let's do top 10 most wholesome.
Be sure to follow my TikTok and So we hit 2 million subscribers on this channel. That really only started because I thought Trump was gonna gulag TikTok, which means there's enough of us to invade the state of Delaware and have pretty good odds doing it. So in honor of us reaching 1 million subs twice, and also since my mom said I should make more lighthearted videos so she doesn't have to lose sleep to support her son, here are the top. In real life, nature don't care about being cute or wholesome. It's survival of the fittest, and in the wild, morality gets you put on a t-shirt. Basically what I'm trying to say is animals aren't good or evil, they're just them. But if you could kindly suspend your disbelief for the next at least 8 minutes, because you know mid-rolls, that'd be great. All that aside, at number 10 is an animal you probably wouldn't even expect in a video like this.
Capybara!
Honestly, you couldn't name 5 animals that have a worse PR team than bats.
Or
Hollywood definitely
not.
didn't do
Okay.
them any favors reputation-wise. And a certain virus named after a beer only made it worse.
Yep.
But not only do they have a strong case for one of the most wholesome, you could also argue that bats may be one of the most impactful animals on Earth. First of all, there's a lot of them. About 25% of all mammal species identify as bats. A quarter of all the mammals on this planet are some type of this weird little bird mouse. And because bats contribute to society by pollinating, if Thanos snapped them all into dust, the world's ecosystems would collectively collapse and food chains everywhere would become ground zero. Over 500 plants depend on bats to keep them in business, and losing them could affect your way of life in places you didn't even realize. Want to add some banana to your morning oatmeal? Chances are your breakfast was brought to you by bats. Enjoying a mango smoothie on the beach? You're probably drinking the fruit of this fur kite's labor. Ever get some liquid courage in you, drunk text your ex, reconcile, work through your issues, grow together as people only to ultimately get married and start a life together? Yeah, probably not. But if you did, better invite a bat to the reception, because without them pollinating the plant agave, there'd be a lot less tequila and less happy mistakes in the world. And I mean that literally. Some of you might not be alive. Beyond that, every night millions of bats meal prep the insects that make our lives more difficult. It's estimated that bats save the United States anywhere from $3.7 up to $54 billion in agriculture just by being free pest control.
That's
now,
a
I already
lot.
know what you're probably thinking. Despite what you might think, the human population would be less healthy if it wasn't for these bats. Many bats help keep the mosquito population in check. Mosquitoes, which also happen to be air Ubers for diseases like Zika and West Nile. But none of that really matters because bats were guaranteed a spot on this list off their looks alone. This bat was literally named after the fact that it looks like a fox in the face. And if they didn't get the blame for putting us in quarantine, they probably would have ranked higher. Now, who didn't think cats were going to end up on this list? The animal that could probably murk us in our sleep managed to finesse its way into over 30 million homes in the US alone.
Well,
And I
cats
do mean
sometimes
finesse
are
because
murder
cats might
hobos
as well have
too.
just domesticated themselves.
Like the house cat
Cats originally
specifically.
came into our lives to snack on the mice that were after our food. But cats also changed minor things about themselves to be around us. While wild cats are more solitary introverts, these cats became more social and tolerant of people. Their reduced aggression and aversion to people made them ideal pets, and their diet of our enemy the rat made them the perfect travel partners as we explored this great big ball of dirt and water. As long as we kept them fed, cats had no problem riding shotgun. Which is why we barely had to domesticate them ourselves. They were basically close to perfect from the beginning. Which is why where a Shih Tzu looks nothing like a wolf, a house cat still looks like it has a lot in common with its wild cousins. We never really needed a selection process for cats the way we did with other animals, because there wasn't a whole lot we needed to change. And as cats spent more time around us, they started to figure us out and adjust their behaviors accordingly. You've probably heard that normally adult cats don't meow to each other in the wild, but they'll do it with their owners since they know humans will react to that sound with more urgency. They even developed a special type of purr that most people find impossible to ignore just to ensure they get fed. But cats give as much as they take. There are legitimate health benefits to having a cat under your roof, which include lowering stress and anxiety and reducing the risk of heart disease. Studies even show that they can purr at a frequency that has therapeutic healing effects on human bones and muscles. And that's not even mentioning all the stories of cats valuing human lives enough to risk their own. Tara the cat went viral after saving her 4-year-old human from an attacking dog. Oreo here did the same, but instead of a dog, he took on a venomous rattlesnake to defend his family. And when Rick Chap suffered a near-fatal heart attack, it was his cat Buddy that saved his life by running across the house and getting his wife's attention. For an animal that looks constantly done with everything, cats really are just nature's tsundere. And if it wasn't for the billions of animals that get 404'd by outdoor cats, they definitely would have ranked higher. One of my favorite movies of all time is Into the Spider-Verse. If you followed me on Instagram, you probably could have guessed that. And one of my favorite lines in the whole movie was when Peter B. Parker says, "Could you imagine a seahorse seeing another seahorse and then making it work?" Well, he wasn't exactly lying. Seahorses are famous for two things. One is that it's actually the guys that are the ones that get maternity leave. Two is that they're monogamous and mate for life. Not all seahorses are loyal. In fact, some will actually switch partners mid-season. But some, like the New Holland seahorse, will find another seahorse and in fact find a way to make it work. Especially since the longer a seahorse marriage lasts, the more luck they have raising children.
Nice.
Of course, a healthy relationship doesn't just happen. Which is why every morning, seahorses will reinforce their pair bond with a dance. They often intertwine their tails and even sometimes change colors as they mirror each other's movements in their version of a waltz. It is aggressively wholesome. And then there's the fact that males are the ones that give birth, and some can pop out thousands of Xeroxes at once. And as soon as he does, his partner's ready to knock him up again. Now there are a few things that knock them down on the wholesome scale. Baby seahorses are known as fry, and occasionally the male takes this too literally by eating his own children. Then there's the fact that seahorses are one of the most efficient life takers in the ocean, with a hunting success rate of 90%. But overall, if you could have a relationship like the seahorses, you'd probably take it. Or you'd want the marriage of another animal further down this list. This animal was 100% a biased pick, and I'm not going to apologize for it. The pangolin earns the distinction of being
Honey,
the
the
most proud
pangolin.
animal I've ever seen. This is the look of an animal patiently waiting for his mom to get off the phone so he can ask her for $10 to buy flowers for his middle school crush. To protect their claws, they often walk around on two legs, and the result is that they look like the embodiment of, "Excuse me, I don't mean to bother you." There's also the fact that underage pangolins are known as pankapups, and they'll often hitch a ride and even nap on their mother's tail. If there's anything negative about this turtle gerbil, I'm Helen Keller to it.
Turtle
Instead of being
gerbil.
predictably related to armadillos, they're actually closer to carnivores like cats, dogs, and bears. And that is exactly the kind of defiance I respect. Pangolins will often take mud baths to help keep themselves parasite-free, but it somehow also manages to make them even more adorable. But because we can't have nice things, pangolins are the second most trafficked mammal by humans. The most trafficked are humans themselves, which is what inspired this group of men from protecting this pretty privileged pinecone from perilous poachers. You better like this video, that sentence took way too long to pronounce. To raise awareness of their efforts, a photographer did a photo shoot of these men with, of course, their pangolins. Even with their population threatened, you can still count on this live-action Pokemon to put a smile on your face. Like bats, pangolins do get a lot of blame for a certain beer virus.
Yeah,
and
I
of
think
course there's that South
Sandshrew
Park
was
episode
based off
about
of
it.
these things.
But like I said, I'm Ray Charles to any form of pangolin slander, and that's simply not going
Hey,
to
honey.
change.
Sandshrew's based off of pangolins, right?
This might be an unexpected addition on this list, because chimpanzees are some of the most violently
Okay.
homicidal things with a pulse. One of the worst ways to meet your higher creator is to have a chimpanzee book the appointment. Yet somehow an animal directly related to them is a perpetual pacifist. At number 6 is our closest cousin in the animal world, the bonobo. They look like chimps nature tried to draw strictly from memory, but their personalities are polar opposites. Their societies are built on love and peace, which is why there are rarely cases of bonobos killing each other. Also, they're
Nice.
female dominated. But unlike other matriarchal social circles, not all the females in the bonobo circle are necessarily related. And while there is a hierarchy, they do look out for each other. High-ranking females will often even defend newcomers from the unwanted advances of males. And instead of castrating each other like their murderous cousins, bonobos solve conflicts with affection. They are the hippie chimps of the Congo. Only thing is, sometimes they're a little too affectionate, which is why any movie starring bonobos is rated B. As in, be sure to have to talk with your kids before you go see them in a zoo, or they may come home with questions you might not be prepared to answer. They be fornicating. A lot. But these apes on ecstasy use a no pants dance as a way to reinforce bonds within the group and solve disputes without actually causing injury, which makes them the most unproblematic thing with thumbs in the world. But it's also why finding safe for work videos of them was veteran difficulty. One wrong move in what they like to do to each other, guidelines will do to me. Swans are often considered the mascot of peace, love, and loyalty. I rebuke that. Swans are mean-spirited Q-tips drunk off pretty privilege. But for a bird that apparently mates for life, swans actually have a divorce rate of about 5%. Meaning on average, 1 in every 20 swan couples calls it quits during breeding season. Flamingos, on the other hand, believe in monogamy the way Nick Cannon believes in birth control, since they have a divorce rate of about 99%. And penguins aren't even worth discussing since they'll cheat on their partner with a hole in the ground. But the most faithful of the birds is the albatross, with a divorce rate between 1 and 3%. The albatross will spend years waiting for the right mate. These seabirds can easily live into their late 50s, so if they got one thing, it's time. Once two albatrosses do pair up, they'll perform a synchronized dance ritual to strengthen their pair bond. It's like the bird version of renewing their vows. Single albatrosses will spend years practicing and perfecting the courting dance, so they have the choreography down by the time they actually need it. And with their lifespan, these couples often spend decades raising chick after chick. Breakups are rare, and it's usually a result of multiple years of breeding failure. Climate change has also caused a slight rise in albatross divorces, but I'm not about to hold that against them. They're like the seahorse, except they're a lot less likely to dip out on their partner, and infinitely less likely to turn their children into a kid's meal. It takes a lot for me to give a bird props, and the albatross 100% earns it. It wasn't a matter of if, but when quokkas were going to make an appearance. Google the happiest animal on earth and you'll get one trying to bear hug you through the screen. Like the pangolin, the quokka was guaranteed a spot on this list on their appearance alone. Being the most photogenic thing in nature counts for something. And since quokkas on Rottnest have no natural predators, they have little to no fear of humans. Which is how quokka selfies became a thing. Quokkas are such mascots for positivity that they single-handedly boost tourist numbers to Rottnest the way LeBron did to Cleveland. In fact, you're probably surprised, not that quokkas are here, but that they're not ranked higher. Well, there's always going to be people that take things too far, and that often gets them attacked by quokkas, and oftentimes it's the children getting the worst of it. To be fair, going viral might have been the worst thing that could have happened to them. Tourists often treat them as a plush toy rather than a wild animal, and that often gets them dealt with appropriately. And as their lack of fear towards humans gets taken advantage of, the quokka ironically gets abused by those same humans. Which of course means them lashing out has nothing to do with them and everything to do with us. There's also this. While quokkas don't actively yeet their children, mothers will loosen muscles in their pouch as a last resort when being chased by a predator. So as the screaming, writhing Joey falls and distracts the predator, Mom of the Year gets to live to make another baby. Which makes sense in the grand scheme of things, since you'd rather lose the baby than the baby maker. But that kind of parenting does you no favors in a list like this. But it doesn't change the fact that when this travel-sized kangaroo steps up, depression hears boss music. Google "we don't deserve" little autofill dogs in the search box. Google knows what's up. The irony is that the animal we got dogs from had every reason to hate us. Thousands of years ago, wolves and humans hunted the same prey and were each other's biggest competition. But then we teamed up, and now you can expect to find a dog in millions of homes worldwide. From apex predator to devoted house pet, there are just too many wholesome facts about dogs to count. For example, studies showed that dogs are more likely to approach someone who's crying rather than someone who's talking or just humming, and that's regardless of whether it was their owner or just a stranger. In the same experiment, dogs would approach a stranger with submissive body language, almost as if they were trying to comfort them. Another experiment showed that dogs actually preferred interacting with individuals who use high-pitched baby voices with them instead of those who use normal, deeper voices.
Really?
But my personal favorite, when a dog and its owner make eye contact, both bodies release oxytocin, which is considered the love hormone, which just so happens to be the same one released when a mother and a newborn interact. You don't have to say anything, you don't have to touch them. You can stare at your dog and you'd be bonding. Which says a lot, since their cousin the wolf sees that same eye contact as a challenge. Not only that, but dogs are one of the few animals that understand the gesture of pointing. Meaning you could point at something across the room and a dog will understand to look in the direction you're pointing, where most animals will just be interested in your finger. Little things like that only happen after hundreds of years of being right by our side. We have service dogs, emotional support dogs, medical response and police dogs. Basically any job worth having can have a dog involved somehow. We even trust them with our children. We might not deserve dogs, but dogs 100% deserve this spot. The silver medal of wholesomeness goes to the capybara.
Yes.
No matter where this plus-size guinea pig pulls up, it's always with good vibes and zero conflict.
They make friends
There are
with
entire
everything.
threads of cappies existing around other animals completely unbothered. The thing is, they could be a complete menace and it'd be totally justified. Capybara live in one of the most dangerous neighborhoods in the world and often share an area code with predators like jaguar, caiman, anacondas, and eagles. And it's not like these buffed beavers are tanky enough to have no worries. They often fall prey to those same predators.
Aww.
Normally, any animal that can get meal prepped by so many others is often high-strung and hyper-aggressive by nature. Nature knows zebras use that excuse. But not only are capybara the complete 180, you'll even see them around the same animals they should be afraid of. Cause this heavyweight hamster is allergic to most forms of conflict. Which is why when a bunch of orphan puppies needed a foster mom, it was a capybara that stepped up.
Aww.
But as chill as they are, capybara are still roided up rodents with teeth that they will use to defend themselves against people. But like with the quokka, if you manage to make this horse rabbit angry, you definitely did something to deserve it. Aside from that, a happy cappy is one of the most wholesome sights in nature. But they just barely miss out on the #1 spot. Of course the manatee was going to be #1. My personal bias would allow no other outcome. Because their teeth are way in the back of their mouths, manatees are physically incapable of inflicting any form of violence, even when they really should have. There are no recorded cases of manatees attacking other animals or people. The closest you get would be a water bloom curiously approaching you and accidentally knocking you off your paddleboard. Alligators are seasoned prehistoric killing machines, and even they give manatees the right of way in the water. Also, its closest relative happens to be the elephant, so again, any spot other than #1 would be an insult.
interesting.
The only problem is their natural curiosity can put them in harm's way when humans, especially boats, are involved. Laws had to be put in place to protect manatees from harassment, since we all know they're not going to defend themselves. They're literally too unproblematic for their own good. Dogs kill thousands of people a year, and someone in the world right now is walking around with a scar from not respecting the quokka's space. But you won't find a person who's been seriously hurt by this gentle giant. Because in a world full of darkness, the sea squishy is a beacon of positivity.
Sea squishy.
But that's going to do it for this video. For daily uploads, be sure to follow my TikTok and Instagram. Especially Instagram, since they don't want to give me my blue check. To watch videos...
Honey badgers don't fear God or lions.
Honey badgers are the most disrespectful force in nature, and that's putting them over orcas. Cause at least when an orca shot puts a seal, you can argue it's just testing a new hunting strategy. But honey badgers will look for negativity in situations where they have nothing to gain. Why would a honey badger test an oryx 10 times its size, get launched only to immediately do it again? Cause honey badgers come into the world deciding they don't want peace, they want problems. They don't want compromise, they seek conflict. If orcas are homicidal sea Oreos, then honey badgers are double stuffed with audacity. If I ever make a list of the top 5 animals with black Air Force energy, honey badgers would be a first ballot choice. But like any kid that acts out in school, to really understand just what makes a honey badger such a one-man hate campaign, you gotta look at its family. When you talk about mammalian carnivores, you can really simplify it into 2 classes, Team Cat and Team Dog. Team Cat would be feliform, which translates to cat-like carnivores, which would obviously include wild cats, but also cats that aren't really cats like hyenas, mongooses like the meerkat, and a bunch of other animals you've probably never heard of. On the other side is Caniformia, which are the dog-like carnivores. This includes dogs, wild, unhinged dogs, dogs on steroids, smaller but more street-smart dogs, and a special group of water dogs that decided they had enough of the nonsense and disrespect of the dirt world and were going to take their chances out in the ocean. Results have been varied. But you also have another family known as the Mustelidae squad, and they were kind of in a weird spot. They weren't the biggest, definitely weren't the fastest, not the smartest, and for the most part they're solitary, meaning they rarely have a numbers advantage. So their only real option was to overcompensate the way anyone that overmatched would, with violence and borderline crackhead courage. If mustelids like honey badgers ran in groups, they probably wouldn't need the personality of a power tool to survive. Because gang violence may be unethical, but in the wild, it's a way of life. It's the reason African wild dogs are one of the most efficient groups at canceling life subscriptions. Because team play is high-key underrated. Ants are probably the best social insects in the game, and it's almost scary how well they work together. Led by a queen who can almost check in at the same weight class as a mouse, ant society is built on a hierarchy where everyone has a job. Female ants are workers who can have tasks such as cleaning the eggs and feeding the larvae. Queen ant's job is to supply the ant census with new bodies by constantly spawning eggs, and some species can spit out over 800 in one day.
Dang.
Male ants have one job, and it's to supply the queen with baby batter and then exit the census once they fulfill that purpose. They have no rights, no free will, they're basically walking ejac packets. And if you ever wanted to know just what ant society is like, the Ants Underground Kingdom is a simulation strategy game with millions of players already online. You can hatch and develop your own ant army, including rare ones like the banshee ant, which is based on an actual insect that isn't really an ant, it's a type of wasp. You can also unlock new buildings like toxic fungi, gorgeous pearl, special nests, and more. Now here's the fun part. The ant armada includes guardian ants. Shoot them, they just take them. And when I say it runs in a family, you can tell the honey badger took something from all of their cousins and made it theirs. We're gonna get to those cousins, don't worry. But first we gotta talk about what makes honey badgers such a middle finger to the natural order. First is the fact that they're not indestructible, but damn it, they're pretty close.
So this one's actually the American honey badger.
Able to withstand bee stings, snake bites, and brutal maulings that would certainly be a game over for other animals. You could even come at a honey badger with a machete and it could still probably Eurostep any serious injury. There's even reports of these steroid skunks taking down African crested porcupines. The same ones that have about 30,000 good reasons why testing them could be really bad for your health. In really rare occasions, porcupines have crippled the top tier lions so badly that hunting humans was their only option. In 1965, after a lion nicknamed the Man-Eater of Darajani was finally put out of commission, it was discovered that it had been gored by a blade beaver, with one of the quills being lodged in its fractured teeth and another one nearly piercing its brain. Maimed and out of options, a starving lion put at least one Kenyan on a t-shirt. That's the kind of carnage porcupines are capable of, yet honey badgers can often survive an encounter with one thanks to their tough skin. The same reason they can square up with snakes and then live to try again. Honey badgers are menaces that have been known to turn deadly serpents like the puff adder and even the black mamba into a purse. Common misconception though is that honey badgers are immune to snake venom. They're not immune, they're much more resistant than other animals, but enough penetrating bites can flatline even a honey badger. But usually if a honey badger is wounded by a venomous snake, it'll just pass out in an almost coma-like state, only to get up a few hours later and walk it off like a Sunday morning hangover. Another fact is that not only is honey badger skin tough, it's incredibly loose, especially around the neck. So if one's ever being mauled by a big cat, this walking cigar can turn around while being attacked and deliver smoke directly to the face. Honey badgers are furry duracells, and anything short of a round directly to the skull isn't guaranteed to kill them. This durability is why honey badgers are either brave enough or stupid enough to blatantly steal from top predators, and they usually target leopards. Unlike lions and hyenas, leopards are solitary assassins that hide their prizes high up in the branches where they can't get their pockets picked. The food may be safe from lions, but they're not safe from a malicious equality symbol with nothing to lose. Honey badgers will risk it all by attempting to steal from a leopard by climbing a tree once it steps away from its meal. If the honey badger gets caught in the act, it'll throw a loud temper tantrum, hissing and screaming as it backs away. A method I'm sure they got from their close cousin, the wolverine. The wolverine is a honey badger on PEDs, built for the freezing tundra of the north. And even though they're roughly in the same weight class as a medium-sized dog, tankier predators like bears and mountain lions will occasionally pay food taxes to this walking vibe check. But the thing with wolverines is, they have the strength and speed to catch their own bodies. Wolverines will stalk a potential victim for hours, even days, and there have been reports of wolverines posting up in trees just so they can wait for the right moment to pounce. But why waste the energy or calories doing that when you can just pickpocket a grizzly or clutch a 2v1 versus wolves? And just like the honey badger, wolverines will attack anything with a pulse. Difference is they have the tools to actually stop it. One wolverine put a polar bear in a headline after clamping its vice grip jaws around the struggling bear's throat until it suffocated. There have even been reports of a wolverine dropping a female moose by ripping at its shoulder blades until it eventually tapped out. In comparison, honey badgers have allegedly KO'd units like the Cape buffalo and water buck.
Oh,
Except
wow.
the honey badger's methods are different. Wolverines are little man syndrome but with bear trap jaws. Even though they might not have superhuman healing powers, they do have rotated teeth. Wolverines are equipped with upper molars rotated 90 degrees inward, meaning they can easily eat a grizzly bear's leftovers even if it's half frozen. That dental plan is why a wolverine will eat every part of an animal right down to the bones. Honey badgers don't have nearly that kind of power, but these prison striped weasels do pack a nasty bite and they've been seen tearing into tortoises. Wolverines have one more secret, and it's that they smell really, really foul. Not only will they use the power of liquid booty as a threat, they'll spray the scent over any food they find to make sure no one else touches it. Which is why the wolverine is also nicknamed the skunk bear. Honey badgers also weaponize their south side. When threatened or just annoyed, the honey badger will reverse its anus inside out and release a liquid so vile it can suffocate anything near it. In fact, the smell is so offensive it can temporarily paralyze attacking bees. It's not hard to see how the skunk bear and the felony ferret pull up to the same family reunion. But you can RSVP the otter to the same function. Otters are considered the most intelligent of all mustelids, and they're a part of the rare group of animals that are able to create and use tools. This one's using a vending machine. In fact, they're so smart that in the 60s, the CIA allegedly tried to weaponize them. I actually made a video on this in an auto report that was created on my TikTok, so definitely go check that out. They're also an anomaly in that they're one of the rare social mustelids, which should give you mixed feelings. Cause yes, sea otters will hold hands while sleeping so they don't float away. Despite my lack of emotion, I find that adorable.
Hey, Jenga.
But otters, especially river otters, will jump anything that enters
How's
their
it
territory,
going?
from caiman to jaguars to idiots with iPhones. If you want your idea of otters to be completely slaughtered in 10 seconds, Google otter and attack and count how many articles you get. A pack of 20 nearly took a man off the Singapore census permanently.
We're watching Casual Geographic. This guy's
She could
awesome.
only watch. Once upon a time, a monkey wandered into the otter hood of the Bronx Zoo, and the outnumbered monkey paid the toll for his transgressions with his soul. That's really only scratching the surface. I already have an entire video dedicated to the carnage society lets otters get away with, but one fact should really hammer the point home. Sea otters have a violent mating ritual that involves biting his partner's nose pad so hard that he can tear it off while occasionally holding her head underwater. That is not the disturbing part, because frustrated male otters that couldn't find a mate will resort to taking their lack of options out on baby seals. Something they'll continue to do for up to a week even after the seal's soul has already evacuated. I mean that in the worst possible way. So in a weird twist, out of these three, otters might have the lowest morality, but to compensate they have the highest intelligence. Don't think honey badgers are just some crayon eaters, they're incredibly smart too. But like the kind of smart that would make them high-class criminals. In an experiment, a honey badger couldn't reach a box of food that was hanging from a branch of a tree. But what would have been a dead end for most animals was only a challenge for him. After a few seconds to carefully weigh his options, the honey badger proceeded to push his crate closer to the hanging box, to the point where he could stand on it to claim his prize. It might not seem like much, but being able to figure this out automatically puts honey badgers in the highest percentile when it comes to animal intelligence. But the best example would be this little guy named Stoffel. Stoffel was a well-known escape artist that would find some of the most creative ways to end his bondage. In one of his many escapes, Stoffel noticed a broom that had been left near him, dragged it over to one of the corners of his enclosure, leaned it against the wall, and then used it to emancipate himself. They tested his skills with a gate, and Stoffel the Black Air Force managed to undo the latches of the lock. They then put him in a cell surrounded by cement walls. Take a wild guess what this little weasel did. Stoffel dug up a bunch of rocks, and when he had enough, he piled them in a corner and Andy Dufresne himself. One night, his caretaker awoke to a burglar in his home at 1 a.m. You know where I'm going with this. Stoffel escaped again, only this time he broke into the farmer's house and even tried to get into his bedroom. And you want to know the most disrespectful part of it all? Stoffel was hand-raised by humans at a young age and imprinted on them. Meaning Stoffel had no intention of actually escaping. Nah, he was just doing it for the sport and for all the memes.
As a
We know that
determined
because
honey
Stoffel
badger.
would allow himself to be caught and returned back to his enclosure just so he could figure out another way to make his caretakers earn their pay. Breaking into the farmer's house past midnight was just grade A trolling. And of course, it would be criminal to not mention that time Stoffel escaped his enclosure and entered the lion's den where he was nearly brutally mauled to death. After he recovered, the first thing Stoffel did fresh out was try to find a way back to the lions to settle the score. Stoffel would also regularly break into the lodge kitchen where he would harass staff and help himself to any food he could find. They eventually gave him a lady badger thinking that would help him calm down. What they really did was introduce the Bonnie to his Clyde as they would now try to escape together. For their size, honey badgers have relatively large brains and they make it everyone's problem. But there's one more thing about them that really makes them a menace to society, and for that you have to look at its third cousin, the stoat. The stoat is one of the smallest of all mustelids, yet they regularly put prey 10 times their size out of commission. They do this by relentlessly chasing their prey, which are usually rabbits, until the prey eventually drops to exhaustion. Only then will the stoat deliver a devastating bite to the back of the skull. And once a stoat locks in on its target, there isn't a force in nature that can stop it. The stoat is so hyper-fixated that it'll even ignore rabbits that might be closer just so they can commit to pursuing its original target. That crackhead determination is not foreign to the honey badger. The only way a honey badger can fend off leopards, hyenas, and even the occasional lion is by constantly squirming, hissing, and biting until the attacker eventually decides it's not worth the calories. Even if they eventually do go out of commission, you can be sure the honey badger did not go quietly. The badger's stubborn nature is probably best summed up when you see what they do for honey. Honey badgers love breaking into beehives to eat energy-rich honeycombs. Unfortunately, that often means getting a face full of African bees, which are more aggressive and more nasty than their European cousins. But these honey weasels will continue to eat even while being actively swarmed and attacked by bees. And even though they're resistant, they're not 100% immune to bee stings. Honey badgers have been known to keep raiding the same beehive for honey until they eventually get stung to death. But honey badgers don't care, they live life balls first with no fear of consequences. This willpower is how 2 honey badgers stepped to 6 young lionesses and still managed to survive. At one point, the honey badger found itself in the jaws of death, only to use its loose skin to turn around and bite the lion back.
Never trust
This leopard tried harassing a young baby badger, only to end up cosplaying as a cheetah once mama badger inserted herself into the conversation. Speaking of cheetahs, honey badgers have such a reputation that it's widely believed that cheetah cubs evolved to mimic their coloring to avoid confrontation with predators. A whole predatory cat, and evolution forced them to impersonate an African bush weasel just to get more respect. For cheetahs, but another notch on a honey badger's chastity belt. I say chastity because they don't give a f. With the strength and durability of a wolverine, the intelligence and morale deficit of an otter, the pure coke-fueled willpower of the stoat, the honey badger's the only thing alive that can make a bull cut intimidating. And that's gonna do it for this video, which was by far one of my most fun to make. If you want to support this channel, my Patreon's gonna be in the description. Also, like the video or suffer a honey badger vasectomy. Other than that,
things are psycho. Videos. There are 5 animals we should all be thankful for.
So you might remember a video I made, the 10 most wholesome animals in nature. And even though I admitted literally in the title that it was biased, I missed one, and I have no other excuse than I just forgot. So we're all familiar with the oppression Oreo of the ocean, they need no introduction. And you'll remember that I've called him the ultimate apex predator, with apex standing for ain't no person pressing him, no exceptions. Well, there is one exception. There is at least one animal that'll stand up to this barcoded sea assault. That's right, we're talking about humpback whales, aka your new favorite whale. Because humpbacks will often go out of their way to interfere with orca hunts, basically calorie blocking them. And this 40-ton equalizer will often rescue seals, sunfish, and even other species of whales from attacking orcas. And it's not like humpbacks are immune to orca fates. In fact, that's probably how this all started. You see, orcas hunt like the wolves of the sea, by cutting off the young or weak from the group and then battering them into exhaustion. This strategy means this overgrown yin-yang guppy is directly responsible for taking humpback calves off the census. So humpbacks do this thing called mobbing, where they'll confront and square up with killer whales to defend their next generation. And it's to the point where humpbacks will hear the sound of an orca hunt and take it personally, which is pretty bold for an animal with no teeth. But they do have flippers that can grow to the length of a pickup truck, with barnacles growing on them, which basically gives them barnacle brass knuckles. They use that and their size to send killer whales packing to protect their young. Now, lots of animals be out here mobbing. And it's not exactly crazy to see an animal defending one of its own. Except, they don't just do this with their own. In 2009, a pair of humpback whales rescued a crab-eater seal from a pack of orcas that was about to make it into a memory, which they did by harassing the orcas until they eventually gave up. A week later, a humpback bailed out a Weddell seal by rolling onto its back and placing the seal on its belly after the ops of the ocean had knocked it into the water. And in 2012, a pair of humpback whales attempted to rescue a gray whale calf that had been separated from his mother by a pod of sea pandas. And even after the baby whale was reverse born, the 2 humpbacks proceeded to harass the orcas for the next 6 hours. Think about that. They could have been doing anything else with their time, and they actively chose to help out a different species. Now you can argue it's instinctual. Adult humpbacks will often escort a mom and calf pair since they're the most vulnerable to orca attacks. And it's possible that whales naturally defend any calves being attacked by orcas. If there are no calves around, they just defend the next best thing, which I guess in some cases might be a seal. But that leaves one big question: why? Whales aren't exactly stupid. They know the difference between a seal and their own kind. So why go out of their way and actively put themselves in danger for something they're not even related to? Maybe they're just chill like that. And also, you don't have to be a seal to be temporarily adopted by a whale. Marine biologist Nod Hosser was terrified when a humpback spent 10 minutes pushing and nudging her. She was terrified until she noticed a 15-foot tiger shark looming on the other side of the whale. Cetaceans are arguably the smartest things on the planet without thumbs, so it's possible they're smart enough to have compassion. Or they could literally be the orca's biggest hater that refuses to let any sea pandas eat while they're around. Altruistic animal or generational hater, either way the entire ocean should be grateful for the gatekeepers of the sea. They're not the only whales here either, because if Thanos snapped beluga whales into oblivion, the world would be a much darker place. And I'm not just saying that because they're white. Everything about the beluga whale is free serotonin. These travel-sized whales are often called the canaries of the sea since they communicate with a series of high-pitched calls. And it sounds nothing like anything that should come from a whale.
That's cute. Aww. Sounds like a bird.
Now I know some person's gonna say I shouldn't call an animal cute because I'm assigning human traits to an animal. That, it's f***ing adorable. And so is the fact that belugas often imitate the sound of human voices. There was even a time where Navy divers were working underwater on a whale enclosure. The supervisor would communicate with the divers through an underwater device called a wet phone. Well, one of the divers climbed out and was confused because when he asked who told him to come up, everyone said they hadn't said anything to him. Well, turns out one of the beluga whales named Nosy did. When the supervisor wanted one of the divers to surface, he would just say out. Nosy heard this, memorized it, and mimicked it so well that the diver swore it came from a human until Nosy did it again. And he somehow managed to repeat it several octaves lower than what belugas usually use to communicate. Yeah, they're that smart. Parrots and ravens can be trained to mimic human speech, but Nosy did it spontaneously and just for the memes. And it's not just a fluke. Beluga brains are twice the size of a human's with more folds in the area responsible for problem solving. It's how a beluga whale can be smart enough to play fetch with your phone. They're also natural extroverts that can travel in groups of 10s, 20s, and sometimes hundreds. And of course, there was that time a beluga whale fell in love with a human. But like in a cute way, not whatever this was. Tina was a beluga whale in a South Korean zoo, but when she was first brought in, she had a lot of trouble getting settled in. One of the male zookeepers spent a lot of time with her and went out of his way to pay extra special attention to her. Again, not like this. The result? Tina caught feelings. She would only kiss him, she'd spit water at anyone that she thought got too close to him, and when other keepers tried to get the same love, she would reject them. So basically, Tina became a jealous, clingy girlfriend, and yet we're still talking about a whale here. Basically, who this guy thought he was, this guy actually is. But yeah, belugas are way smarter and way more wholesome than they get credit for, despite having one of the most demonic looking mugshots you'll ever see. Just like orangutans, who are probably the best single mothers you'll find in nature. Orangutans spend their entire lives in the trees. It's actually how they got their name, which translates to man of the forest. This means orangs are hundreds of feet above the possibility of being clapped by a tiger. But it also means that mothers have to eat, sleep, and travel while the next generation literally clings onto them. Every night, Mama Orang will build a bed for her and her baby from scratch using the branches around her. And again, she has to do this while praying gravity doesn't straight up snatch her child. And that's pretty much her life for the foreseeable future. Because orangutans are the biggest mama's boys on the planet that aren't human. They typically spend 6 to 9 years as their mother's shadow, but can easily stay well past a decade. Because being a ginger tree gorilla has a high learning curve, orangs spend all this time learning how to orangutan from their mothers. But sometimes they choose to just not leave at all. And with the cost of rent, who could blame them? And while the sons usually dip out far and wide to start their own lives, the daughters usually stick around close to where their mothers raised them. They'll even visit their mothers every so often and even help out with any younger siblings. But honestly, the most wholesome thing about them is that this man is still able to walk. Because if Diet Bigfoot would have folded him like a lawn chair, I don't think anyone would have blamed her. Honestly, with orangutans in general, if they really wanted to rock our world, they could probably do damage. Like, you remember the orangutan that figured out how to pick locks and escape his enclosure and use this knowledge to flex on his zookeepers? If Fu Manchu had a malicious bone in his body, he probably would have caught a body. So we should all be thankful that orangutans are like the underachieving genius of the great ape group. Because if Planet of the Apes ever becomes nonfiction, I'm gonna be way more worried about what Maurice might try to pull than whatever power trip Caesar might be on. Orangs would be the ones to discover 4chan and dox anyone they think might be a threat. And if we ever get to that point, going off the grid with a service like NordVPN might be your only option. Because NordVPN creates an encrypted tunnel for your data and protects your identity by hiding your IP address. Meaning you can disappear to a place no tech-savvy simian can find you. Speaking of disappear, orangutans are with an additional 4 months free. And with NordVPN's money back guarantee, it's basically risk-free. Being around the
Sorry,
next
just
animal is
skipping
also
the
risk-free unless you happen to be
solicitation.
allergic to happiness. Cause let me tell you, depression here's the Undertaker's theme when this ginger beef pulls up. Honestly, I didn't know a lot about Highland cows before this. They're here almost entirely because of their looks. They're the oldest registered breed of cattle in the world and they originated from Scotland. But with their ketchup smear haircut, you probably already knew that. If you had the chance to change your fate, would ya? Looking in the face, cow. But let's talk about that hair. That shaggy fur coat means they can eat all the freezing weather the Scottish Highlands have to offer, especially rain and snow. And having buffalo bangs is believed to protect their eyes from pestering flies, while also making them look like the fifth beetle. Even though I literally just said ginger, they come in a lot of flavors, including white, black, silver, red, dun, etc. But the real reason they're here? They're basically the capybara of cattle. And like the capybara, they have no business being this unproblematic. They used to have to deal with dangers like bears, wolves, coyotes, and even mountain lions. And you'd think that they'd use that generational trauma to justify road raging at anything with a pulse. But the most dangerous thing about them is that if you get their attention too quickly, they might just accidentally clothesline you. But even that's more on you than him. A clear-cut social hierarchy means Highlands rarely have to deal with fights within the group, meaning any violence they cause is strictly an accident. And since their insulating fur helps keep them warm, even in some of the most unforgiving weather, they don't have to compensate by packing extra fat, since that means they don't completely crush the plants under them, and since they're considered light grazers that only eat the tops of grass instead of cutting it all the way down, that means this cow manages to even be a friend to grass. It's pretty much a tank with golden retriever software running it, and we should be thankful for them just existing. This last animal is gonna sound random, but once I give you his full backstory, it'll make sense. So let's talk about Pale Male. Nah, not the guy from the movie High School Really Had No Business Showing. Pale Male was a red-tailed hawk that moved to New York City in the early 90s. At first he tried nesting in a tree, but then got evicted by a neighboring family of crows who I guess wasn't accepting of his kind. And I'm guessing one of their names was Jim. So he decided to settle on a building on 5th Avenue just across from Central Park. And once he was all good and settled, he found a mate who people named First Love. They 100% jinxed her because she would become injured and was moved to a raptor rehab center in New Jersey, and evidently PM would rather start all over than move to New Jersey. I'm from New Jersey, I can make those jokes. But while she was gone, he found a new mate, this one a young female named Chocolate. You can just call that an entanglement. The first time parents struggled to bring up their kids, but eventually would successfully raise 3 chicks who would go on to live in a nearby park. And a little while after that, a car would turn Pale Male into a widow after Chocolate collided with it on a New Jersey turnpike. But one could argue that was her fault for being in New Jersey in the first place. But just like that, First Love returned fresh from rehab and lived up to her name after she and Pale Male reunited. And together, First Love and Pale Male raised multiple chicks. That is until First Love became initials on Pale Male's Twitter bio after she ate a poisoned pigeon. And at this point, Pale Male became a playboy who went through multiple partnerships and chicks. We have no way of knowing for sure, but it's believed Pale Male had at least 4 wives and up to 25 children. Also at one point, building workers removed his longtime nest, so for a while it looked like it was up for him. But by this time, Pale Male had fans, and they weren't having any of it. And after multiple protests, the city compromised by installing a cradle for Pale Male and whoever he was shacking up with to nest in. So yeah, bro had all types of plot armor. We don't know if he's still alive, but if he is, that would make him well over 30. But we do know his DNA is still flying around Central Park to this day. And as a bird of prey who hunts them for a living, that makes Pale Male directly responsible for single-handedly nerfing the number of rats and pigeons in this city. And if you're not thankful for that, then you've never been to New York. And as someone who used to be afraid of pigeons, I know that's something I'm thankful for. But that's gonna do it for this video. Be sure to check out my TikTok and Instagram, and also consider becoming a patron on Patreon if you want to further support this channel.
You guys see something you guys want to see? Let me know.
I tried to tell you about orangutans. I did say if something like this ever flips a switch, it's gonna be a bad time for everyone. But it took this ginger gorilla getting his lick back on camera for y'all to believe me. But like, all jokes aside, orangutans aren't aggressive, like, at all. Like, thank God whoever designed them for that, because it would be terrifying. But orangutans almost never choose violence, not even with each other. The only time you'll see an orangutan get active is if a male runs into another adult male, and even then it's a bunch of bluffing and displaying and just being loud to prove a point. Hands rarely get thrown. In fact, there are no recorded cases of a wild orangutan killing a human. They're just plus-size pacifists. So one of two things happened here. One, that's an orangutan trying to play. Or two, and I'm willing to bet money this is what actually happened. The man was provoking the orangutan like an idiot and getting in his face, but the person behind the camera didn't hit record until the orangutan decided he had enough. And in situations like this, I'm always going to look at the guy outside the cage before I look at the animal in it. And also, just personally, I don't love any article of clothing that much. I would have just negotiated my shirt, but you know, that's just me. So update to the whole orangutan debacle. Turns out I was right. Turns out this man, well, 19-year-old, hopped the enclosure fence and started taunting the big ape, literally for clout. Bro wanted to go viral and the orangutan said, yeah, I can show you the way. Almost cost him an arm and a leg, but mans did numbers on Twitter. Not to mention the orangutan was on recruit difficulty, because I watched that whole video and I counted at least 3 times where he could have gotten his folded. Jokes aside, this pissed me off for a lot of reasons. First of all, if that orangutan would have killed him, not even, if he would have broken his arm, what do you think the headlines would have been? Probably something like, vicious orangutan goes crazy and brutally mauls man. When it really should be, wannabe influencer gets exactly what he asked for as wild animal goes wild animal. Not to mention, if it got to that point, the zoo 100% would have taken out the orang to save the guy. Even though orangutans are endangered and dumbasses on the internet are kind of overpopulating. And I just know Harambe was watching from the beyond like, ain't that some bullshit? It takes years for keepers to gain the trust of an animal like that, and this man managed to destroy it all in less than 10 seconds. I'll say one thing though, he chose the right ape to try this with. If he would have tried the gimmicks with a gorilla or worse, a chimp, yeah, none of us would have seen that video. Or at least not without a Tor browser, because this would have turned into a snuff film. Now what if I told you someone managed to do something even stupider than this? Warning, this will piss you off. Meet this woman whose name I'm not going to say because I don't want to get sued. And she didn't just get too close to an enclosure, nah, she decided to walk up in it like she paid rent.
Good lord. Oh, she dumb.
So 2 things. 1, this was in Texas, so Florida you can unclench.
Oh,
and
Lord.
2, those are spider monkeys. This is a spider monkey. I don't know what kind of game she thinks she's playing, but she could have lost badly. One wrong move and they could have her looking like she could unlock Voldemort's phone. And if that weren't enough, which it obviously was, she even decided to feed the monkeys Cheetos. Not even like the original ones. Nah, she went flaming hot. I don't think I need to tell you why that's bad. Then again, someone like her is able to vote, so... Yeah, they tell you not to feed wild animals because the food we eat can make them violently sick, especially if it's flaming hot. The woman was kicked out of the zoo and allegedly charged with criminal trespass. She also lost her job at a law firm, which at first made me happy, but then made me seriously question just how she got that far. And I think about it, that's probably where she got her lawyers from. You know who she is, I don't gotta say her name. And after going viral, she swiftly received the online spanking that comes with it. After all the backlash, she finally released a statement where she was actually apologetic and really seemed to understand the gravity of, you know I'm lying, right? Nah, instead this woman who somehow survived 26 trips around the sun still doesn't think she did anything wrong because in her words, nobody got hurt. I'm sure the monkeys wish they could have that one back. But she did learn at least one valuable lesson. To keep her Cheetos to herself. My mom doesn't like when I curse on the internet, so I'm gonna end it right there. If you've seen this tiger before, you've probably been lied to. This tiger went viral a few years ago for having Down syndrome, which caused obvious facial deformities. People love this pug-faced predator so much that they used him to spread awareness. Except, he never had it, and the truth was actually way worse. See, the thing is, white tigers are rare, like 1 in 10,000 type rare, and most don't survive longer than a year in the wild because if you can't camouflage, you're probably gonna starve. White tigers are also really popular for animal traffickers selling them on the very much illegal exotic pet market. Yeah, screw those guys, by the way. So the easiest way to breed white tigers is to have 2 white tigers hook up so their recessive genes can produce another white tiger. The problem is, well, there's a lot of problems actually, but the biggest one is that because Caucasian carnivores are so rare, the ones they breed are often related, which is how they get more inbred than a family reunion. Kenny the tiger didn't have Down syndrome. He was a twin-cest baby whose parents were siblings, and most of his actual siblings became past tense the moment they were born. The guy that bred him tried to lie and say he looked like that from smashing his face into a wall a bunch of times as a cub. Yeah, Kenny was rescued and taken to an animal sanctuary in Arkansas, along with his brother who was cross-eyed, because that's exactly the kind of thing that happens when you have an aunt, mom, and an uncle, dad. The sanctuary took care of Kenny for as long as they could until he eventually passed away at the age of 10 to melanoma. It's a sad story, but it could have been worse. R.I.P. Kenny, you deserved way better than you got.
That person's gonna get bit.
A lot of people sent me this, so I just wanted to point out 2 things. So I'm gonna play it back, try and see if you can notice what it is.
Bring it back to me. It's a dance floor. I don't know.
So that slow blink is actually the universal sign that a cat is relaxed and at ease. We've seen this with bigger cats like lions and tigers, but even pet cats will use this as a gesture of trust. To the point where a lot of animal shelters will decide whether a cat's safe to handle based on whether it slow blinks or not. And it works both ways. You can pretty much slow blink at your pet cat and it's like their version of a smile. And the second thing is, right at the end, the jaguar rolled over on her back. The underbelly is the most vulnerable part of a cat, so them exposing it like that is the ultimate sign of trust. It doesn't always mean they want you to touch them, it's more them trying to tell you that they're comfortable around you. I don't know what you did, but keep doing it, because that cat loves you. So King Julian would actually be a queen. And not in like a yassified way, but in real life, ringtail lemur society is female dominated. Lady lemurs assert their dominance by bullying the low-ranking males at every opportunity. And they usually do this by chasing them around, grabbing them, and biting them. But their favorite way to flex on the males is by straight up snatching any food out of their hands. Or in this case, a stick. And they don't even have to be hungry, sometimes they'll go out of their way to do it just for the feminism of it all. Also, lemurs smell so bad that they manage to weaponize it. As in, they'll rub their scent glands all over their tails as a way to build their ammo, and then pretty much just throw their body odor around. Also, they're much more homicidal than the movie wants you to believe. There was a study done on 1,000 animals to see which one was more likely to kill their own kind. Meerkats were number one, since about 19% of meerkat deaths were caused by another meerkat. Lemurs were not far behind, with up to 17% of lemur obituaries being co-signed by their own kind. And a lot of it comes from females kidnapping and abandoning babies and males straight up aborting them. Moral of this video, King Julian was a hyper-homicidal, child-endangering, BO-blasting drag queen. So you probably know the story of Harambe, but not enough people know the story of Jumbo. So this goes all the way back to 1986. 5-year-old Levin Merritt was excited to go to the zoo with his family. But when he got to the gorilla pen, bro got a little too excited. While leaning over to get a better look, he lost his balance and fell 20 feet straight down, breaking his arm, fracturing his skull, and knocking himself out cold. When Levin regained consciousness, he awoke to Jumbo, a 400-pound silverback gorilla looming over him. The kid understandably screamed, and that momentarily freaked out Jumbo, and witnesses thought this was going to end in the worst way possible. Jumbo protectively stood over the child and had been gently stroking his back as he was unconscious. Jumbo even kept other gorillas away when they got curious and tried approaching the boy. It became clear to everyone that Jumbo was protecting Levin like he was one of his 20 kids. Oh yeah, Jumbo was like that. When Levin started crying, Jumbo calmly led the other gorillas to a small hut in the other corner of the pen, which was when paramedics were able to rescue the boy, who ended up making a full recovery. But the funny thing is, this incident might have saved gorillas in general, because back then people were terrified of and even hated gorillas. King Kong didn't help. But after the video of Jumbo looking after the fallen boy went viral, and this was back in the 80s, viral was a big deal. The public perception of gorillas did a full 180. Now you're probably wondering, what was the difference between this and Harambe? And the answer is actually depressing. With Harambe, people were screaming, throwing objects to distract them, when all they were doing was freaking the big ape out even more. Harambe got agitated, and that's why they ended up doing what they did. Had the people not screamed at him, Harambe wouldn't have gotten so agitated, he'd still be alive, and the pandemic never would have happened. So I actually have a lot of thoughts on the Harambe situation, and you're probably not gonna like them. So if you don't know about Harambe, give the phone back to your mom. TikTok's no place for a 5-year-old. A Spark Notes version, kid fell into gorilla pen, gorilla goes up to the kid, gorilla starts getting agitated, zoo officials got a rifle and ended him. The gorilla, not the, yeah. And the big question is, should they have murked Harambe, especially when he didn't seem like an immediate threat to the child? Here's the thing, they could have tranquilized him, but that easily could have backfired. Think about it, it's already a stressful environment. You got people screaming and throwing things at you, and that's after a child-shaped object just got airdropped into your living room. Getting shot with a tranq would only amp him up even more. I want y'all to watch this video.
チンパンジーが叫び声を上げて怒っているようです。職員に襲いかかろう。
Animals don't understand what a tranquilizer is. As far as they're concerned, you just tried them. And in the 5 minutes it would have taken to work, Harambe could have raised absolute hell. And if a 400-pound Harambe seriously injured or even deleted the kid, that zoo is done for. Because technically the kid shouldn't have been able to get into the gorilla enclosure in the first place. It's stupid, but it's like a balcony. You shouldn't have to tell a fully functional human being not to jump off a balcony, but if one does and there are no rails, the owner of that building is still getting slapped with a violation. So if a 3-year-old managed to get into the gorilla pen and then got deleted while there are armed zoo officials present, that zoo is finished. The zoo would get sued to oblivion and all the animals would get relocated and have to find a new place. And as an animal with a human body count, Harambe would almost certainly get turned into a hashtag anyway. It sounds like I'm taking the zoo side here, I'm not. In a situation that messed up, there is no right answer. Someone was gonna lose. Just sucks that the someone had to be the animal whose only crime was literally just being an animal. But yeah, glad I didn't pull the trigger. You're absolutely right, and I was saving this story for last on purpose. This is Binti Jwa. She's a western lowland gorilla, which actually happens to be critically endangered. Also, she's the niece of this gorilla Coco. Didn't know that before.
Wow.
This story goes all the way back to 1996 in a Brookfield Zoo just outside Chicago. A small child was excited to see the gorillas and as a result, fell into the enclosure 25 feet straight down.
Yikes.
How so many fetuses end up in gorilla pens is beyond me. The 3-year-old broke his hand, was knocked out, and was bleeding heavily out the side of his face. And while all the other gorillas seemed confused and unsure of what to do, Binti went right up to the fallen boy. To everyone's shock, Binti, who was already a mother at this point, cradled the injured boy in her arms and even seemed like she was looking around for someone to help. Then, with her own 17-month-old hanging on her back, Binti carried him across the enclosure over to a door where zookeepers could get to him and gently laid him down. But here's the part a lot of people don't realize. As a new mother, Binti had learned to hand off her newborn daughter over to zookeepers so they could get her examined by vets. Binti did the same exact thing here, treating this boy she'd never met before like he was one of her own. But there might be another reason why she did this. You see, Binti was actually abandoned by her own mother when she was born and had to be hand-raised by humans. And when Binti became a mom, it was those same people that taught her how to care for her baby by using dolls. This story didn't just go viral, it went mid-90s viral, and it almost single-handedly changed the way a lot of people see gorillas. And in case you were wondering, Binti is still very much alive in the same Brookfield Zoo where she turned 34 in March. As for the baby gorilla on her back while she saved the little boy, that was her daughter Kula, who's 25 now and has a baby of her own, which makes Binti a grandmother. God bless you, Binti. So a lot of y'all tagged me and wanted to know what that is. And honestly, I don't really know. Okay, that was kinda cap. It's a maned wolf and they're pretty common in Brazil and Argentina. But they're not wolves, they're not foxes, they're not even cross-dressing coyotes, they're kinda just their own thing, and they are really weird. Because even though they're technically related to wolves, most of their grocery list is just fruits and vegetables. Like that one dude that brings a veggie burger to a cookout. Now that I'm saying that out loud, they're basically the pandas of dogs. Also, they smell like Snoop Dogg's studio, to the point where police were called to a Dutch zoo to investigate what they thought was burning bush when it was actually just still puppy's piss. Also, they straight up sound like an identity crisis. See what I mean when I say they're just weird as hell? They honestly look like what happens when God's on a deadline. On a serious note, in 2011, a Maine wolf got run over by a truck and left to die. But a Brazilian zoo managed to save her life by treating her with stem cells, making her the first wild animal to ever be treated with stem cell therapy, and eventually she was released back into the wild. Just thought that was cool. I swear nature just be making shit up, because what if I told you what you just saw was some weird prehistoric water-loving jungle rhino? Well, I wouldn't exactly be lying. That is a bear's tapir and is basically the less clouded cousin of horses and rhinoceroses. Rhinoceroses? You might recognize them from Ice Age. Or it might remind you of Drowsy, because this Pokemon is actually based on a Malayan tapir. And that's because in Japanese mythology, the Malayan tapir would devour the nightmares of all the townsfolk to make sure everyone had good dreams. The Baird's tapir is the national animal of Belize, and even though it looks like a rough draft rhino, its nickname is actually the mountain cow. And they're way bigger than you think, and at up to 800 pounds with a horse's mouthpiece, they are 100% capable of f***ing you all the way up. There's also something about them that, I'm not proud that I know this. Basically, tapirs have a fifth leg, and they've been known to use that meat tripod as a back scratcher. Because Guidelines has been on mine, I'm not going to show you. Instead, here's ASMR you didn't know you needed.
Yep, I did not need that. What the hell is that?
Some things just have Australia tattooed all over it. This little guy is a Stropher's gecko, and it's found in only one place in the world, and it's in the land down under. Now, it's not hell, it's Australia, but I wouldn't blame you for getting the two mixed up. To defend itself, this gecko shoots out a harmless but nasty smelling liquid at anyone that wants to find out just how far evolution went with this lizard. And even though I just said it was harmless, when mixed with ammonia it becomes flammable and a lot less harmless. The reason is because these geckos often get picked off by birds. So these chameleons use that money shot to convince birds that they're not even worth the effort of trying to eat them. It's like Spider-Man, but instead of webs, it's a Febreze of liquid ass that probably tastes just as bad. I was considering making a jizzer joke, but it just didn't come to me. Unlike this gecko.
The hell is that?
So when I first talked about this, I thought it was a black sea hare, a giant species of sea slug, but it turns out the truth is somehow weirder than that. This crab is being eaten alive by a worm, specifically a marine flatworm, part of the group Pseudoceras. They're the ones that have those pee-pee sword fights where one tries to get the other pregnant by stabbing it. Yeah, those guys. The reason the flatworm's covering the crab is because it's trying to invert its digestive system so it can literally digest the crab from the outside. Or option 2, it'll spit digestive juices into the crab, wait for the crab to become a pre-digested paralyzed soup, and then slurp it through its mouth. Also, some flatworms will use poison to cripple their prey just so they can eat them alive. The poison some of them use is a toxin called tetrodotoxin. If that sounds familiar, it's the same toxin that makes the blue ring octopus and the fugu blowfish so dangerous. And by dangerous, I mean this octopus can turn 26 grown men into hashtags. And this blowfish can drop 30. Not points, but bodies. Moral of this video? Yeah, that crab is f***ed. These teeth belong to the world's scariest vegan. This is a gelada baboon, and even though its teeth looks like it should belong to a saber-toothed cat, they eat almost nothing but grass, and they'll spend all day grazing like cows. And they'll do this while rolling up in squads of up to 600. That is a gelada monkeys. And that joke is why I'm still single. Speaking of failed relationships, they cheat on each other like all the time. Normally, only the dominant male is allowed to mate, but sometimes the females will go behind his back and hook up with the lower ranking monkeys, and they'll even suppress their usual mating noises just so they don't get caught. Because if they get caught, the male could turn the side piece into a hashtag. So yeah, they know what they're doing. They're also called bleeding heart monkeys because of that bright patch of skin on their chest. If you have a weak stomach, hide in the comments, you're not gonna like this one. Because when a female gelada's in heat, she'll start growing this weird ass blister necklace that tells other males she's available. Hate it. I hate all of it. I somehow almost forgot to mention this, but they'll flip their lips and expose their teeth to intimidate a rival or someone who's just too close in general. And considering sometimes they'll form gangs and bully other animals like leopards, yeah, you don't want those problems. Now, what if I told you not only is this skull real, the animal it belonged to very well could have been your neighbor. If you live in North America or some parts of Asia, this thing could have made its home in your backyard. This is the headpiece of Metamynodon planiforms. It was a semi-aquatic unit of an animal related to the rhinoceroses of today. Basically, lock a hippo and a rhino in a hotel room together, and this disrespect to the natural order is what would have walked out. Metamynodon was estimated to grow to 13 feet long and break the scales at 4,000 pounds. Like hippos, this walking bus of an animal would have grazed on mostly grass. But they also would have used those tusks to run phase with each other in the evolutionary arms race for female validation. And also like hippos and crocodiles, Metamynodon's eyes were near the top of its head, meaning it could see you while being almost completely submerged underwater. And just like the homicide horse of today, Metamynodon would have been a f***ing problem. But this swamp rhino got vaulted about 35 million years ago. Because even nature knows when to stop the gimmicks. Nah, it's just me, but check this out. This is one of the most endangered animals in the entire world, and there's not much time left for them. This is a vaquita, and scientists believe there can be less than 10 of them in existence. Just a little background, a vaquita is a type of porpoise, and a porpoise is just a Dollar Tree dolphin that no one seems to really know about. And this off-brand flipper exists in only one place on the entire planet. The only place in the world you can find it is in the Gulf of California and Baja California in Mexico. Even though it's related to literally the biggest animals in the world, at less than 5 feet long, the vaquita is the smallest of all living cetaceans, which is a group that includes blue whales. The biggest threat to this travel-sized dolphin is they keep getting caught in fishing gear, which causes them to drown. To show you how badly we hoed this Make-A-Wish whale, in 1997 there was believed to be something like 600 of them. That number dipped to 245 in 2008. Now there aren't enough in the world to run a game of full-court basketball. The worst part is they were first discovered in 1958, which means we managed to pack their entire up in only 60 years. The Mexican government banned fishing with gill nets, which was their biggest threat. There's also petitions like this to raise awareness. Link in bio. Link in bio. If we're being honest, it might just be up for them. On this episode of Animals That Were Never God's Favorite, squids have a donut-shaped brain with their esophagus running through it. The donut shape actually helps them link information that they receive between the two eyes. But it also means squids are forced to eat with small bites at a time. Because if a squid tries to swallow something too big, it can actually mess around and give itself severe brain damage. The hole in the brain isn't even that big, it's like less than half an inch. Which means something like a Popeye's biscuit would give them an aneurysm. That is, if it didn't past tense them instantly. Giant squids avoid getting flatlined by their food because they have a radula, which is basically a tongue with teeth. So if a giant squid tried to eat you, it would first tear you to shreds with that nightmare of a tongue before swallowing you. And only after grinding you into human dirt would the squid be able to pass you down his throat. Now, nobody's perfect, but having to eat basically flavored sand for your entire life just so you don't accidentally factory reset yourself just seems like an intentional you from people wanted me to react to this. So basically there's an animal draft and I have many thoughts. Most people choose between a good time and a long time, and Team 1 said get and chose neither. You failed the assignment when the most intimidating animal on your roster is this.
Oh, it's being cute.
We love dogs, but if you only have one, it's not going to take you very far. Bison are cool, but since evolution them and put two of their lungs in one cavity, for an animal built like a tank, they're pretty easy to one-shot. Sea turtles are dope, but you picked an animal that can get folded by a Ziploc bag. Team 1, it's up for you. Team 2 used the second overall pick on a steroid weasel. Now that tells me all I need to know. Made up for it with the crocodile and the Komodo dragon, and elk isn't exactly terrible, but your team does lack one very important thing. I got no type of speed. And notice how I didn't even acknowledge the koala. Because unless it's during the 10 minutes they're awake every day, the koala isn't going to be a factor. Even if it was, it wouldn't be good for much except spreading chlamydia to the other teams. Now we get into the real Team 5, you started off strong by picking the largest land predator on the planet with the polar bear. I guess you ran out of to give because then you picked the African bullfrog and followed it up with a genetic disaster that is the liger. Technically, the liger is the biggest big cat on the planet, but it's also a walking medical bill that can suffer from arthritis, organ failure, and cancer. You wouldn't even have to kill the liger, time would do it for you. You do get points for picking the animal with the highest recorded bite force at 3,700 pounds per square inch. It's kinda like getting hit with a prehistoric sledgehammer with teeth. Then you followed it up with an animal literally nicknamed Black Death in the Cape Buffalo, not bad. But honestly, none of that even matters because Team 4 did y'all dirty. Team 3's tough, I am not denying that. But any team with the largest animal on land, the actual largest big cat because ligers have no business existing, and the psychopath of the sea is going 82-0. And if you disagree, elephants body hippos, a horse could kick a cassowary's lights out, a tiger would murk Kangaroo Jack. This is what orcas do to sharks. And the panda, I ain't gonna lie to you, he's just there for vibes. Basically, it comes down to this. Nothing on land is f***ing with an elephant, nothing in water is checking an orca. Adding a tiger is just gravy. Team 4 got it.
Huh? Yeah, I did a little bit. I'm sorry. Sorry guys. I did work today, so. Okay. So you let me know when you're ready, sweetie. Alright, honey.